This is Flimsy Slimsy at your service. Welcome to My Man! So my last video on this channel revealed to you all the fact that I am a giant movie fanatic. But would you have also guessed that I am a giant Stephen King fanatic as well? Anyway, I am here to cover the most recent novel of his that I have finished. Now, I don't mean his most recently released book, that would be The Outsider. I just mean a random book from his bibliography, and that happened to be the most recent book I decided to pick up and read from start to finish. In this case, that book is Firestarter. So this is not a new book by any means. It was first released to the public on September 29th, 1980, which by today's date is almost 40 years ago, since we're in 2018. The book was also adapted into a film, which was released in 1984, the trailer of which being one of the sources of video footage I'm using right now. If we are speaking of the hardcover book club edition, which is the version I own and which was modeled after the first published hardcover edition, the novel is 371 pages in total. While Mr. King is primarily known for his work in the horror genre, this particular book happens to be more of a crossover between science fiction and thriller. So the novel's plot: Andy McGee and Vicky Tomlinson are two college students that both find themselves in a fix for some extra money, and who end up meeting for the first time when they both sign up to be guinea pigs in this drug experiment happening right there on campus. This drug experiment is being conducted by a secret government organization called The Shop. The mysterious drug being administered to the guinea pigs in this experiment, which is described to them as being comparable to LSD, is known only as Lot 6. Long story short, the experiment goes awry and is declared a failure. If memory serves me right, one of the 20 or so other students involved dies of a heart attack right in the middle of the experiment, and a couple of others basically lose their sanity for good, which manifests itself in episodes of yelling and screaming. During their time in the experiment, Andy and Vicky both fall in love. Years pass, they get married, living out a mostly undisturbed existence. That is, except for the occasional moment or two of the US government's interference, their way of checking in with them to continue studying the Lot 6 experiment's effects. Somewhere along the line, Andy and Vicky produce a daughter, who they name Charlene, or Charlie. Now, because the Lot 6 experiment caused alterations in his DNA, Andy gained the ability to push people with his mind, meaning that, just as an example, if Andy's trying to talk somebody into making a decision that they don't really want to make, Andy could use his mind's power to manipulate the other person to make whatever decision he wants them to make against their will. So basically, it's like the Jedi mind trick in Star Wars. The disadvantage, however, is that each time he uses the ability, it gives him a small headache. And if he uses the ability too many times within too short a period of time, he risks killing himself by making his head explode. At the same time, their daughter, Charlie, is born with the ability called pyrokinesis, which is basically the ability to light fires with her mind anywhere she pleases. Needless to say, the task of raising a child with such an ability proves endlessly difficult for the two of them. In addition to this, when the shop finds out about Andy's newly developed ability and also Charlie's ability, they are both deemed too dangerous to just be free to roam the streets, and the shop goes on a mission to incapacitate the two of them and bring them back to their headquarters in Longmont, Virginia for further research and testing. Vicky tries to stand in their way, and of course, she ends up murdered. After learning of this, Andy and Charlie hit the ground running and spend the better part of the former half of the book trying to escape the shop's clutches. Eventually, they're both captured and placed in the shop's facility, where they're both tested upon and filled with various medications that cause lethargy, drowsiness, and lightheadedness. And this goes on for almost a year before Andy finally hatches a scheme to break Charlie and himself out of there. That's the story in a nutshell. Now let's talk about the strength of the storytelling. There's no denying that Stephen King is a master storyteller, but there's also no denying that horror fiction is and probably always will be his strong suit. And admittedly, while this may sound like a stupid excuse for not getting the most out of this story, I think one of the biggest disconnects between me and this novel is that stylistically, the novel simply didn't go in the direction my heart wanted it to go. When I first heard about the storyline for this book, all I could think to myself was, wow, a little girl that can create fires with her mind wherever and whenever she wants? That sounds so cool. But I wanted Charlie to be more of an antagonizing and murderous character as opposed to the innocent child that Mr. King was making her out to be, and spoiler alert, that doesn't happen. I mean, she does burn a few people to death in the book, but she's only willing to kill bad guys or people that deserve to die. As far as the end result of what happens to Andy, Charlie, and the shop, I thought the explosive finale towards the book's final pages was pretty predictable. I mean, as I speak, you're probably imagining your own special version of the finale in your head right now, and how you're imagining it right now is probably a lot more entertaining than how it plays out in the actual book. And for the novel's final pages themselves, I would have preferred to have just a little bit more closure on everything that happened than what Stephen King ultimately gave us. So, yeah, the ending, disappointing and predictable. Beyond that, I felt like the characterization in this novel could have been better, and I'm not just saying that because of my sentiments towards Charlie. As a character, Andy McGee just seemed a little derivative and unoriginal. I mean, throughout the book, he's risking his life to protect his daughter because what decent father wouldn't, and that's all well and good, but I really wanted to get more of a sense of what his personality was like. But because he's not given much of a personality beyond him being driven by his quest to protect his daughter at any cost, I ultimately walked away from this book feeling like I never really got to know him that well, despite Mr. King's best intentions. In fact, the most interesting character in the novel to me was the one-eyed Indian hitman, John Rainbird, who is one of the side villains. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with having an interesting bad guy, but when the bad guy, or in this case, one of the bad guys, is literally more interesting than every other character, that's a sure sign of bland characterization. As far as the pacing of the story goes, let's face it, fellow Stephen King fans, one of Mr. King's biggest shortcomings as a writer is his occasional tendency to dive headlong into incessant detail about people, places, or things that either don't add anything particularly great to the story or are just plain vacuous. Despite this being one of Mr. King's shorter books, this one is no stranger to that syndrome. At the same time, I would say the syndrome is very hit or miss here, with some of the chapters and subchapters being more interesting and with others being more tedious. So the quality is a bit of a roller coaster, shall we say, like fluctuating between, ooh, this part's exciting, and okay, this is kinda humdrum. However, I'm not going to reveal any other important plot points because despite maybe one or two minor ones that may have escaped me earlier, I do want this video to be relatively spoiler-free for those of you who have yet to read the book, who love Stephen King, and who still want to read it despite all my complaints with it. Now, for those of you who really like this book and who might be preparing to give me the keyboard warrior treatment in the comments section, let me just say this. I get how you might be irritated with me for the sheer number of complaints I had with the book, but despite the issues I had with it, please understand that I did not dislike it. It made for a pleasant read, and I was actually very entertained by a certain percentage of it. Just at the same time, the remaining percentage didn't thrill me anywhere near as much. I kinda had to force myself to finish it, and because of that, among other flaws like the bland characterization and whatnot, I would say that Firestarter falls into the good but not great category of Stephen King's body of work. In my humble opinion, of course. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would give this book about a 6.5. In the end, if you really love the sound of the premise and you're like a die-hard Stephen King fan on a quest to read every single book he's ever written, I would say give it a look-see, but otherwise, don't feel too badly for missing out on this one. If you agreed or disagree with this video, please let us know why in the comments. We'd love to hear your feedback. All opinions are welcomed, be them concurring or dissenting. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. That really helps support our content. And if you really enjoyed this video and are interested in seeing others like it, you can hit the subscribe button. Doesn't cost a thing, don't worry. And if you hit the notification bell to double subscribe, you can have a notification sent to your email every time the My Man channel uploads a new video. Thanks for watching, everybody, and until next time, this is Flimsy Slimsy of My Man, signing out.